Welcome to another episode of the Fortis After Hours podcast. I'm your co-host Nate, joined by my wife Liz.
Hey.
And guess what? We got another awesome episode planned for you guys. As powerlifting coaches, we program specific numbers for our athletes to hit.
Now, I will say, powerlifting, also I do this for some just like general strength people who are working on like the main three lifts that have like goals of building strength and getting stronger.
I was just going to say, I think if you have a goal of getting a little bit stronger, whether that be in a powerlifting sense or like Liz said, just kind of general strength, health and fitness, while those people, like sometimes with my personal training clients, I might not actually put it down. That is the same kind of system that I'm using. And basically the goal, simply what I wanted to define is you want to progress those numbers over time, obviously. So you want to start at the lower number and then get to a higher number. And of course there's ups and downs and all arounds in between, but the idea is to try and get the most clean path from point A to point B. And to do so, you're generally going to see numbers programmed in one of three different ways. So that's going to be just a straight percentage of your 1 rep max. You might see a range of numbers, so something in between a top number and a lower number. And then you might also see something called RPE, which is got popularized by powerlifting, and that is rate of perceived exertion. So that's actually taking into account how you feel on the day, which is, just to be clear, it's how you feel, not how your friend thought it looked.
Yes.
But we're going to be going over all three of those and then kind of explaining them real quick and talk about at the end a little bit about like what we like to use for our clients.
Yeah, and I will say some coaches might use a combination of, I would say typically 2 would be like the most. You can't really do this exact percentage plus this range plus this
how you're feeling.
RPE.
Yeah.
So that's not a thing. But like some coaches you might see using like a percentage plus an RPE or a range plus an RPE. Not all coaches will do that, obviously, of course, and every coach and or program that you follow is going to look a little bit different. But just if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, well, I get 2 different things sometimes. Like that is
that's fine.
A thing sometimes.
And that's also something to get out of the way in the beginning. I think all 3 of these are perfectly fine and could be used, I truly believe, with anyone to create progress. So like I don't think like one is better than the other. I do think that one may be best for certain clients, but that's an individual basis, and you as a coach will have to evaluate which one is going to work best for your client. But I don't think, just to clear that up, because like, I don't know, some people think it's like one or nothing.
You have to use one
all
or you
3
have
of
to
these,
use the other.
Yeah, 100% all 3 of these, if done correctly, will make progress happen. So all right, so let's start off with just a simple one, which is one that we were first introduced to, and that is just a straight percentage-based program. So generally, programs like this and or writing workouts like this, you got to take a person's 1 rep max or even sometimes estimated 1 rep max. Specifically with this one, I've seen a lot of people, they'll use like an estimated 1 rep max calculator. Those are dangerous.
Tells me I'm real strong.
Yeah, exactly. But either way, so they use that number. Let's just say it's 100 because I'm bad at math, and that makes easy percentages for Nate. So let's just say the number's 100 is your max. Then it will have, 3 sets of 10 at 60 pounds, 60%. And then the next week, 3 sets of 10 at 65%. That's generally how those programs look. And there's a specific percentage that you're supposed to hit on that given day. And those can be great. We both have done programs like that in the past.
I think that if you don't have a max, obviously it's going to be a little bit harder because you're coming up with like an estimated 1 rep max and you're not really sure exactly where you're at. So like the percentages could be a little bit skewed. So I would say if you're like a brand new beginner and you don't have a max, that would be a little challenging.
I agree. And or if you're new and your max is constantly changing, then you might end up doing, I don't necessarily think it'd be bad, but it's just going to be a little slower because you might end up doing like the same work twice type situation where like, it's like, because it's just a piece of paper or, if you're working with a coach, then obviously that should be changing. But like my point is, if your max is constantly changing as a beginner, then you might have to go higher than the percentage says you need to go.
Yeah, than like what it's written as.
Yeah.
And so they can work. We've used them. I've gotten stronger using them. But typically I think when I use them, I had a 1 rep max for everything at that point, and so I kind of like had somewhere to go, or like somewhere to start from. So if you don't, and you are trying to follow like a percentage based one, like, I mean, you said like you can go and use like a 1 rep max calculator based on like what you can do for like 5 reps or 3 reps. Then you can go and like calculate it, and they can estimate what you might be able to do for one. Or you can just make like a realistic guess too, which a little scary, but like you can
take your ego out of it.
Yeah, like if it's like a genuine like, oh, I think like, okay, I did like 75 for 5 or whatever, I could probably do 100, like going off the same number used, like, you know, but you could be wrong. So
you don't
also
know.
like if you don't truly know what your 1 rep max is, like you could be wrong if you're estimating. And so, but my point in saying that is just to keep that in mind. So if the percentages aren't quite fulfilling what you're trying to do, like they're too easy or they're too hard, that's okay. You just might need to like make some adjustments.
On game day, and I think, or on your training day, and I think maybe something else, because I mean it's pretty easy to explain what each of these is, but maybe something else that we can add in for everyone is like who it might be for. So I do think like the pluses, and maybe like some pluses, minuses. So the pluses of programming like this, or if you have a coach that programs like this, just straight percentage number, do this on this day, is that it is nice and simple. So if you're brand new, I think this can be good. Like Liz said, it might be a little tricky figuring out the percentages at first, but if you're brand new, if you just hand somebody a sheet of paper with the percentages, as long as they follow it, like, you know, based off a realistic max, not some crazy like, you know, thing, they're probably gonna make progress. I don't know, again, it might be a little bit like the slower way, but you don't know, it might be fine. So that's a plus of it. It's simple, it works. Progressive overload is going to work, and you'll be able to make progress that way.
Now, I personally feel like if this is like, if you are doing just like a straight percentage, I would kind of hope that that would just be like you're following a template.
Yes.
Versus like having an actual coach just tell you do this percentage.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some coaches that maybe just do that. I feel like if there's a coach and it's individualized programming for you, I do think one of the other two options is going to be, I would almost say like expected from like a one-on-one coach, at least a percentage range. Like maybe if you don't want to like, I mean, you don't have to, I guess, calculate the percentages if you don't want to, but like, I feel like as a coach probably would be good. But I feel like if your coach, I feel like a range is just going to be better, even if you're doing percentages. Just because whether you're new, old, like experienced, less experienced, like some people can just do more or less with reps, percentage-wise than others.
It's so, and I would say these are the kind of the negatives. Like that's really the only plus. Is just it's super simple, and for absolute beginners, if you're just like following something is better than nothing. I guess is what I'm saying.
That's a good like template
like
thing
a template
to follow.
thing,
Maybe
but as a coach, and that's a great point. As a coach, I would definitely agree with Liz. You probably should at minimum be doing some sort of range, or range plus RPE, or RPE, something like that.
Or there's a very specific reason that number is there.
And so what I was gonna say is, if I was using this as a coach today, the only way that I would use it exactly is like, if you're recovering from an injury or something like that, and honestly, my client probably wouldn't even know what the percentage is. That would just be on me, and I would just be putting on a specific number, and I would still say, hey, you know, like maybe I wouldn't give them a range, but maybe I just say a number. So I would say 70. So I want a 70% effort, but like I would say in instructions or in real life, hey, like, you know, if that feels weird, go down, or hey, if that feels really easy, go up a little bit. So it's kind of an unspoken like plus or minus.
I feel like one of the only times that I really use this currently where it's like do this specific number, which I put in a number, but it is sometimes very specific, calculated off a percentage, would be for like a deload week. And sometimes I don't really put in a range because like sometimes like you just need to do what that is. I mean, obviously if someone's dying or hurting or not recovered, like of course I'm not gonna be like, oh, you're a failure, you didn't hit the number I gave you. Like of course there are circumstances, but typically it's fine.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think...
But I would say that's probably one of the very few times I will ever only program one specific number that is based off of one specific percentage.
Yeah, I think that the percentage thing, just one specific percentage, definitely has its limitations in that it is not flexible. And as human beings, we have to be a little flexible. You know, we talk about that all the time on our podcast in the past. You know, like we don't live in a perfect world where you like, perfect sleep, perfect nutrition, perfect supplementation, perfect everything, like all the time. That's just not what we live in. And a set specific percentage kind of implies that, like, you know, as you get more like advanced, like, you know, like that's where you're at, and that's just not the case. So I think a little bit more comprehensive coaching is going to include either a range or an RPE or a mixture of both. So that's what we're moving on to next is a range of numbers. So a range of numbers is generally going to be taken off of some sort of percentage as a base. You also might take it off of real life, like how someone's moving a weight. And, you know, if you have watched enough people squat, bench, and deadlift for enough reps, you're going to be able just to know kind of ish where they should be for a back down set or something like this. But it's going to be a little bit more flexible than just a straight percentage. So a range is generally going to be a range like a high and a low number.
And I would say anywhere, sometimes it's like as small as a 5-pound range. Like I would say maybe on like bench for like,
I'd say up to 20 pounds.
Up to 20. I've
30.
probably even given like a 30-pound range, especially like the bigger the numbers you're lifting, the bigger range you need because it's like a percentage of what you're lifting. That
and or like right now I have a few people, they had little like injuries, little tweaks coming back from that. Sometimes I'll put a bigger range there because I want them to feel the flexibility of, at least, I don't know how they probably don't feel like that because they just look at the top number. But I want them to feel like they have an option in between a heavier and a lighter weight based off how they are feeling on that day. That's really the purpose of the range. So.
And sometimes what I've been doing lately with some people who do get a bigger range, like I will leave a little note on there that says like you might be doing 2 within this range because I know like my clients sometimes like to start at the bottom end of the range. Certain ones, which is funny because then I have certain ones that like don't even look at the bottom of the range. Like that number just doesn't even exist. But it is there for a reason. That's okay. But anyways, I know some will start at like the bottom end of the range or they're a little more fearful to push towards that top end. So I will put like a little note, like it's okay if you do 2 in that range or, you know, whatever. Like if there's multiple singles within that range, especially if it's a bigger range. Because if they start at the bottom of the range and it's like super easy, then they're missing out on like what they could be doing if they think that they can only do 1 within that range. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I do that sometimes for myself. Like I'll start at the bottom end of the range for the day and I'll hit that. And I'm like, well, at least I got in the range. And then if it feels good, I go up. And if it doesn't, I don't.
And that's totally fine because I think the main goal, which really comes into play with the range and the RPE training, like Liz said, a little bit more specific and customizable for each athlete, is to hit a certain stimulus. On, you know, a week 1, you might want a single that's like confident and speedy. On a week 4, you might want a single that just gets completed. You know, like it depends on the stimulus that you're looking for as a coach.
It also depends on the lifter too.
And I was just gonna say that it depends on like how your lifter is. You know, like sometimes lifters need a little bit more of a push, and then others need a little bit more of a pull back. I personally am the one that needs a little bit more of a pull back. Otherwise, I'll just run myself right off the edge. Done that many times. And anyways, it's important to, as an athlete, when you see a range, to look at the range at least and like think about it because the range is there for a reason. If we didn't want to put a range there, then you'd just be doing a percentage-based program, which is what we just said.
Singular number.
Which is 100% not going to be as long-term effective. I don't want to, like we were saying, you can use it, but it's just long-term, it's not going to be as effective because there's just not as much flexibility. A quick example of this in real life, let's say you're coming back from a travel, something like this, just because I just did this. You know, like you're coming back from traveling, you're maybe not going to be like 100%, and you might like, in your brain, you're like, okay, like maybe I'll hit this low end of the range, see how I feel, and then I'll go to the top end. Or maybe I hit the low end and then I'm done, and that's it. And it just kind of depends on each day. And I think with a range, you can kind of like, I don't know say customize, that doesn't really make sense, but like you can select as an athlete the correct number to match the correct stimulus for that day.
And but that does put some responsibility on the athlete to choose wisely within that range, though.
And to execute that number wisely.
If they chose the top end.
Or the low end. Because I was going to say, sometimes I've done this myself, so I'm not saying anyone, whatever, like I've done this myself. This is a problem I've had. Oh, well, I'm just hitting the low end of the range. Like, what? I'm just gonna, no problem.
No.
Here's the deal. If you're picking the low end of the range, chances are you're gonna need to try even harder than you thought.
Because you probably don't feel good
Because you don't feel good that day, exactly. So, that's just something to take into consideration. And I think if you as the athlete can really learn to pick a number, the correct number in that little range, and understand that anything in that little range is okay and gonna help you progress, then you're gonna be fine.
Yeah, because and this is coming from a coach or your coach, depending on who you are
listening.
Hitting something clean, good technique, good form, confident reps or rep within that range, even if it's at the lower end, is better than going to the top end of the range and failing or losing your technique or your form like really bad to where it breaks down and then you're just like dying through it. Trust me, I have done that before. Basically, I did that a couple years ago before a meet for my current PR triple that I did.
Oh yeah.
And I like grinded through that triple. I still I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And then my squat kind of died after that because basically I exerted so much that then the next few weeks my body just couldn't recover, and then the meet did not go well. So there's just something to be said. I did that to myself. I understand that I did that, but it's a learning experience, and I learned that I probably would have been way better off choosing a lighter load within the range on that day for whatever reason. That day just was not the day to be pushing that hard. And I probably would have ended up having a better meet or the rest of the training block and meet. So there is something, and again, it's my fault. Looking back on it now, I can see what I did and see that was not the right call. But so that's just, I don't know. Just basically even if you can't do the top end because it is just too much for the day, take somewhere else in the middle
crush it.
And then make it look good, make it move
do your
good,
best,
execute it perfectly, so then you are still getting essentially the benefits from doing whatever the weight is and not killing yourself to where you can't recover.
And I think another thing which you can bring over kind of from the weightlifting sphere, Liz hates to hear this, but at the end of the day, it is just the facts, and that is that speed and velocity of the bar and how you move it, technique wise, matters. And that's really what you're doing, finding the correct number in the range where you are still moving the bar well. There's no up down in the bar, there's no dead stop in the bar. It should be moving well. I mean, you really want to move all your reps well like that. You don't really want to have if I'm, and when you're younger, trust me, me and Liz both, we could grind through some crazy reps. We probably could still do it now. But the thing is, you really want to save that potential for the actual platform because you can't grind through every rep. And the purpose of that range, and then what we're going to talk about next, RPE, is to find a good bar speed, good bar velocity. We don't do actual velocity, tracking, whatever, but you can just look at the video and be like, that was good. Or you look at the video and you went maybe a little too heavy on that day and you're like everything's shaking. Whoa. That's maybe not so good. So anyway, so stick within those ranges and look at the range. If you're an athlete, look at the range. It's there for a reason. And if you end up having to select something, heaven forbid, in the lower end of the range or the mid, that's fine. Just crush it in your brain. And trust me, I am that person. I see a range, I'm like, okay, so this. But sometimes you gotta pick what's in the middle of the range or what's at the bottom of the range.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
And I will say, like, if you do select a weight and it is a little heavier than probably intended for the day, like, that doesn't mean you need to just, like, give up or, like, you
like
ruined
stop in the middle of it,
everything or whatever. Like, because I am a believer, and I will forever believe this in my coaching philosophies, I guess, if you want to call it. Like, sometimes, like, you need to learn how to push through
100%.
a rep that's hard.
Oh, yeah.
If all of your reps in the gym are always easy, smooth, like, minimal struggle, like, you never really have to, like, fight for anything.
Yep.
It's gonna be really hard on meet day when all of a sudden you have to fight for something.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what that feels like. So I'm not saying you need to grind out every rep. I'm saying you should not grind out every rep, actually. But, like, every once in a while, if a rep
okay
is
to
a little
push.
hard or a set's a little hard, like, it's okay to push through that.
100%.
And, like, obviously, like, maybe do back downs a little bit lighter or take a little bit more extra time to recover that week if you know you pushed a little bit harder than maybe you should have or intended to.
Yeah.
But I am a very big believer that sometimes you need to push through hard reps in order to learn how to push when, like, push comes to shove on the platform.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree 100%. And I think you know, challenging yourself in that way is key. I just think, and I think if you lift weights, you're listening to this, you're engaged in this conversation that we're having, like, you know, like, there is a level of grind that is, like, next level, and some people don't even ever get that. Like, they don't even get to that point. And that, I think, if done over and over and over, can be detrimental. But I do 100% agree with Liz. And we actually encourage that. A lot of our athletes, we teach them, like, you know, you have to be able to grind through a rep or push through a rep. Because
I don't necessarily like to tell them to grind
yeah,
through
yeah.
it, but push through it.
Yeah,
like,
it's a great term. Yeah, I agree.
Let it be
That might be a
hard.
good distinction.
Yeah.
Grinding out reps all the time, no.
Yes.
Pushing through reps sometimes, maybe even like
yes.
a few times a month, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, that happens.
And I will say specifically on bench.
Yeah.
For females.
Yep.
Like, it's just, sometimes you just gotta do it.
Sometimes you just got to push through it. Okay, so you got your percentage pace, you got your range, which can be kind of based off of percentages and also RPE, and here we have RPE only. So RPE only is rate of perceived exertion, and programs like these start with, they have, you know, okay, squat, and it's going to be RPE 6. And what that means is, you don't know what that means.
On
it's
a scale
dependent
of
on
1
the
to
it's
10,
dependent on the person.
It's a 6.
So yeah, as the athlete, you need to kind of think, okay, like, do the rep and then just think somewhere in between 1 through 10. Now, there's a lot of drama's not the right word, but there's a lot of controversy, drama, I don't know. There's a lot of information. I will say, I'm just going to say it. So I don't know the term, but there's just a lot around RPE, which is ironic because it's such a simple thing that gets so, like, convoluted. And what I mean by this is there's RPE calculators. There's like, stop right there. It's literally rate of perceived exertion. So it is how you feel on that specific day under that bar at that time. So in my opinion, it needs to be a purely intrinsic feeling, and, like, you are the only one that really knows. You know, what looks like an RPE 8 to me might be like RPE 6 to Liz. It's in my opinion a very intrinsic way of coaching. I think it can be very effective, but I do think it takes a specific type of athlete and coach relationship to make it effective. I think it gets, like I said, just complicated. There we go. It gets very overcomplicated, where I think personally you might just be better off using a range to help your athlete progress. Because in my opinion, once you go from RPE 8, but also let me plug this into this calculator and this and that and the other, and it's all based off of max, like, I mean, you're just doing a percentage anyways. Like, you know, so I think if you're doing an RPE training, it's rate of perceived exertion. It should be like how it feels. Like Liz said, 1 to 10, you know, I put an RPE 6 squat. You squat it and you think to yourself, okay, like, I could do only 2 more. Well, that's might be like more like an RPE 8.
I think like RPE, and then there's also reps in reserve.
I was going to mention that, yeah.
Which is RIR. I try to kind of like connect the two for people to kind of make it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So like basically for each number going down from 10 is like how many reps in reserve you should have left.
Yep.
In theory, like
yeah,
roughly.
In theory.
So
yeah,
like
yeah.
an RPE 9, you could do 1 more rep. An RPE 8, you could do 2 more. An RPE 7, you could do 3, and so on. Now, obviously, that's not exact, and you don't know because you're not actually doing them.
Yeah.
But it does kind of give you like a little bit of an idea. Like if you're just really confused about RPE and that's the training, personally, I will kind of like combine the reps in reserve with the RPE for like people that I'm coaching sometimes.
And I think that's a great tool, a great way to get people
to understand
RPE. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then also a lot of people, which is totally fine, especially if you're newer to powerlifting, have no idea what a 10 actually is.
Yes.
And that's fine. Like you don't need to know what a 10 is if you've never done powerlifting before, but it is very hard to gauge what is an 8 if you don't know what a 10 is. It is very hard to gauge what is a 9 if you don't know what a 10 is, or a 7 if you don't know what a 10 is.
Yeah.
So like that is something else that like I have a hard time with RPE is just because like if you don't know what an actual 10 is, how can you gauge what's less than that?
Yeah.
So, which is why I sometimes struggle with giving that just an RPE to beginning lifters, which is why I will typically add on the reps in reserve. Like sometimes for like newer lifters or like people that are just starting out, I'll give them a number range with an RPE with the reps in reserve. Like
and to see
literally
which,
kind of like all 3 things that like, basically my point is like you should probably be somewhere in this number range, but I want it to feel like maybe a 7, which means you could do 3 more reps.
Yeah.
So I try and like lay that all out to explain it. I don't do that forever for people because usually once they kind of like get going, they learn that and they're like, okay, this is like what it should feel like. But that way, like it's almost kind of like teaching what these things mean and how weights should feel, like not being grindy, like, you know, oh my God, I'm gonna die every single week, and like teaching that like you should be able to do more reps.
Yeah.
You don't need to go to failure every time, but maybe it should be around this number range.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a whole conglomeration of things to help teach what that RPE is.
And I think that's really smart, and I think that, you know, when you're using an RPE in conjunction with like a range, I think that's super helpful actually, because you can kind of explain what something in the range should be feeling like.
Yes.
Which can help people that maybe just only go to the top, like myself. Like if it's like, oh, Nate, this should be somewhere around like an 8, and I'm like, oh, like this top was about to be a 10. So, you know, like that could be super helpful.
Yeah.
I think that RPE on its own can be, I think that is the most tricky of these 3 to get right.
Yes.
And before we talk about more of that, we're gonna take a quick break.
Yeah, I think RPE alone is definitely a tricky concept for a lot of people to understand, which is fine.
And rightfully so, yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of weird, just because, like, I don't know, and like, I think what's hard about it too is like, you want to progress each week, but like, sometimes you don't feel good. So then you're like, well, how do I progress if I don't feel good? Because you know that you should be lifting more weights because it's week 2 or week 3, but you feel way worse than week 1 and everything feels really heavy. So
and there's no range bottom to kind of back you up on that decision. You know what I mean?
So
like you feel like you're like, well, I'm failing. Like,
yeah, so it can definitely be like a tricky feeling, a little bit like, I think you would have to be like, honestly, I think the people who are going to do that best are fairly experienced.
Going to be more advanced lifters. Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go.
I think for new lifters, it's very hard to not have at least some type of guidance with that RPE.
No, I think so. I think the RPE can be useful. I think it's most useful if combined with like a range, just so that like people can experience like a feeling type thing. I do think when you're, like I said in the beginning, when you're combining it to like literally these things exist where it's like an RPE calculator finding like different numbers.
Like
I just think
RPE
at this point,
7 should be this percentage
at
of
this
your
point,
max.
just use
use the percentage.
Just use the percentage. And like Liz said in the very beginning, I think a percentage, just straight percentage, just one number is going to be better for you as a lifter, more than likely, than just straight RPE, because you know what you're supposed to do, and like you can also just use some common sense just as a human. Like if you're like getting under the bar and you're like, I don't think I could do this for 10. Well, probably just go a little lighter. You know what I mean? And you know, if you have a coach, like we like to use that range method, and that has a range, like obviously that gives you a little leeway, but I do think as a beginner lifter, I think a percentage-based program is going to be perfect for making some good initial progress. I really, like Liz said, I think RPE straight should be used for just probably pretty advanced lifters. And what I mean by advanced is like, we'll say, like if we quantify it into years, because that's really what I'm talking about, not actually absolute strength, because maybe there's like a few individuals, like 5 or 10 in the world type thing, like that just like have powerlifted for a year and they're at some crazy elite level and they need an RPE to like regulate correctly. But like that's not most people. And I think you need to be probably training for at least 5 or so years to really gain some good benefit from a straight RPE program.
Yeah, I think.
And what I mean by that is literally like RPE 6 squat. That's it.
Yeah.
Like that's all it says.
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches, not a lot, maybe that's a little extreme. Several, a few, use this because it is real easy.
I was just gonna say, yeah, super easy.
All they have to do is program a single at RPE 6, and then the next week a single at RPE 7, and then the next week a single at RPE 8, and then technically that's progressively overloading, and that requires them to do 0 effort. Yeah. So I will say that is also something to like keep in mind. If your coach only is prescribing you RPE, like I'm not saying every coach is like this, and like there are some like, and I will put RPE on some like variations. Like if I don't, if we don't have a max or it's a new variation, I'll kind of put the RPE reps in reserve to like get people to kind of understand what it should feel like. But if every single lift on your paper or sheet or app or whatever only is RPE, just know that is a very easy way for them to coach without actually coaching you. Yeah. Now they might give you great feedback and you might be totally fine, and that might be just how they coach, and because there are some coaches that do that. Mm-hmm. But I will say there are some coaches, because the whole world of powerlifting coaches is now just anybody can be a powerlifting coach. You have, kids who do one powerlifting meet and then start coaching people. Where it's real easy. All you have to do is say, do this at RPE, whatever, 5, and then 6, and then 7, and then 8, because obviously progressively overloading is going a little bit heavier and making it a little bit harder each week. So that's just my little, I don't know.
2 cents on that,
yeah. It's like, if you only have an RPE program, like, make sure that your coach is also actually coaching you.
Yeah, because I agree with Liz, like there's just a lot left up to the lifter, versus like if you as a coach should be kind of doing some of that work and making sure that you are selecting or helping to select that proper stimulus for that day. Because I mean, most likely that's why the lifter came to you and like is paying you money to, they want your help and your advice and your expertise in this area to make sure they're hitting not too much, not too little, just right.
Specifically if they're into powerlifting. Now for some people, if they're just their general fitness, like maybe they just kind of need to be doing, like I'll put in just kind of like challenging but doable, which is essentially RPE.
I love that term. Yeah, I love that term. Yeah.
That works for a lot of lifters. Yeah. Like especially if you're not planning on competing, you're not trying to get to maximum strength. You're just trying to go in, get a good workout. Every day could just be an RPE, 6, 7, 8, whatever number it is, and it could just be like a challenging but doable weight for the day, and like that's fine. Mm-hmm. I'm talking more like powerlifting, where you are trying to prepare yourself for a meet, for a day, go into meet prep or throughout meet prep. Like you just need to make sure that like you are best prepared for that day.
Yeah, and something that I've noticed is, sometimes when you just have a straight RPE program, people will go one of 2 directions. They'll go either too light all the time or they're going too heavy all the time. And it's very rare that I see someone, we actually have one person in particular that I know here that is pretty spot on with their stuff. But fun fact, they are a very advanced lifter in their total and time lifting under the bar. And other than that, like I've not seen too many people over the years that are like pretty good, at least from my perspective as a coach, just looking at how the bar is moving, how their strength is progressing or not progressing. It's generally either not enough stimulus or too much stimulus, and it's hard to find that middle ground, which is totally understandable. As an athlete myself, that like
I would have a very hard time with an RPE only program.
Me too. I would be way too heavy all the time. That's for me.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we both share that. Like if we both put like RPE 7 squats, would be like,
oh yeah,
I could probably do two or three more. Yeah, that'd be fine.
It's fine. It's totally a 7. Like,
so I think to wrap things up, I think the percentage based or percentage only is going to be pretty good for like beginner lifters. Once you progress a little or you hire, a coach, I think adding a little bit of a range is going to be a little bit more, that range, which is what we like to use, is I think going to be a little bit more customized, a little bit more personalized to the individual and help them also learn to find their correct stimulus for the day.
And also it does, I will say, like it does teach you to execute on days that are not great. Because sometimes like I had one of the girls I coach, she like this week, she's like, oh, I'm feeling so weak. Like she's been working crazy hours, like feeling terrible, went into bench, she wasn't feeling it. So like if it was only RPE, probably like a bar would have been like a 10,
exactly.
It would have felt terrible. But there was a range in there, and so she went into the range and she absolutely crushed it. But like
you might not do that if you just had the number.
She basically hit like what her meet max, like current meet max is, just in the gym on a day where she felt terrible. So like sometimes like having that range with that accountability of a coach like checking on you or like knowing, and also like having someone else be confident that you have that strength to hit those numbers sometimes can push you to execute weight that maybe you might be like, oh my God, I feel terrible. And you would never even try. And then she absolutely smoked this weight that like is crazy for her to be benching just like 11 weeks out from a meet. So it's cool to like, sometimes that's like another benefit of having like a range, because you can just like, it teaches you to execute. Like, I'm going to do weight in this range and I'm going to execute it. And then you do.
And like you said, I like that point too. It's like the confidence from your coach, like, okay, I can do this. So I think, that's what we use. Obviously, we're fans of that, a little bit biased towards that, but we've used it with, over time, many athletes, both beginners, advanced, elite, like I said,
some get a little combo of
some,
range plus RPE
and
plus
RPE,
whatever.
Like we like sprinkling a little RPE in there. Sometimes, like Liz said, I'll do it on secondary days where I'm just like, just kind of feel it out, because it just depends, like I don't know, like you might be destroyed. So obviously you're going to go a little lighter. But yeah, so RPE, I just think, it can be used kind of in combination, like Liz was saying, almost to help define certain like feelings and how weight should be feeling. But just on its own, I really think that should just be reserved for specific use cases, and definitely more advanced athletes is going to be my opinion on that.
Yeah, I would agree. And like, if you work really closely with a coach, like one-on-one all the time, like they might start being able to learn essentially like your RPE, which is funny, like, cause you can kind of tell, like as a coach, you can tell like kind of like how it feels, how it moves, how it looks, if it's really heavy for the day, if it's pretty easy. Like you learn that about your lifters. So like if you do work with someone for a really long time and work very closely, I would say like almost like personal training though, with them, you can kind of learn almost a little bit of RPE for them, even if they don't know that's what you're doing for them. But I would say that's a very like specific basis, and like you'd have to be working like with your coach for a very long time to like really develop that.
Yeah, and I think that's still
possible.
I think it still takes, like what you just explained, that's still more of like the coach doing some of that work
versus
I think
the athlete,
like I think to truly like be able to have the intrinsic, like basically just like you're just kind of in the middle and you're like non-biased towards like, and you're able to actually say, okay, I think it should be this. I think that takes a more mature athlete, period, dot. I just think, because, I mean, what you were describing, that's just, in my brain, that's just good coaching. Like, you should be, like, definitely, and I've come to the point where I actually kind of explain that, especially with newer online clients and athletes, like, I'll just kind of say, all right, give me like a month or two to like really kind of dial into like, because I got to learn like, okay, how they move things. This is bad. This is good.
Well, because some people just like everything looks so easy, and then all of a sudden, I say everything looks so easy, and then all of a sudden they just can't do it anymore. Or everything just kind of is like they're a slower moving lifter, but like they're fine and they can just keep going. And so like it does take time to learn, but then also that's kind of why RPE is hard to gauge. Even as a coach for me, like if I watch your video and you're like, oh yeah, that's a 7, but I'm like, that looked like a 9. But
Yeah.
like actually maybe like you could have kept going, or the other way around. Like
Exactly.
you're like, oh my gosh, that's a 9. I'm like, that looked like a 6. Like
you were fine,
so
yeah.
it is hard, that is why it is hard to like just rely, and also for like your coach, so you have to like learn your lifters basically too.
I agree. So I think that about does it.
Yeah.
All 3 can be used. I think there is a valid argument for using any of those 3. I do think you can progress using any of those 3. I think I definitely am like biased or whatever. I just objectively think that the range is going to be, I think, the most efficient way to get you from point A to point B. I just believe that is going to give you the correct stimulus, the most accurate chance at hitting the right stimulus for each individual training day. And like I said in the very beginning, if you're watching on YouTube, like the line, as we know, is not, because otherwise you wouldn't need powerlifting coaches. The line is not just from point A straight to point B. There are ups and downs, and I do think that the range is going to help you select the stimulus that's right for that peak and valley. So that way, when you draw a line through all those little peaks and valleys, it goes up, not across or down or like barely up, something like that. So I do believe that the range finder method, so to speak, is going to be the best for most people. But I think you can definitely progress with percentage. I think you progress with RPE.
I think what's like most important out of all of this though is like communicating with your coach in like how it feels, what you need,
100%.
how your recovery is going, how, if there's a range, like did it feel terrible, did it feel good? Like the more communication you have with whatever style of training you're doing, the more progress you're going to make.
And I think we'll leave it at that. That's a perfect little ending point. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please remember to subscribe to the podcast or follow us. I can never remember what it is these days. But subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're not already there. Hello, YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube. And thank you so much for subscribing on YouTube. We're at like 410 or something subscribers in just a couple months, which is fantastic. We really appreciate your guys' support as we continue to grow that channel and fill it with lots of educational, awesome content like this. So anyways, if you haven't checked any of that out, check it out. And we'll see you guys in the next episode of the podcast. Peace.
Bye.